Imagine a company so powerful that every September the entire world pauses to watch its next move. For over a decade, Apple's iPhone launches have been global events, not just product announcements. Millions of fans wait with breathless anticipation, investors prepare their strategies, and the tech industry braces itself for the ripple effects. But with the launch of the iPhone 17, something unusual happened. Instead of applause, celebration, and excitement, there was confusion, disappointment, and even outrage. Social media was flooded with criticism about the phone's design, color choices, and lack of groundbreaking features. Loyal customers who once lined up outside Apple stores to be the first to own a new iPhone suddenly began questioning whether the brand had lost its magic. And while this wave of disappointment spread online, the real impact was seen on Wall Street. Apple's stock, which usually climbs after a major launch, instead stumbled badly, dropping by more than 4% in 2 days and wiping out a staggering $112 billion from the company's market value. The question everyone began asking was simple. How did Apple, the most valuable company in the world, turn its most anticipated product release into a moment of doubt and financial loss? The story of the iPhone 17's troubled launch begins with expectations. For years, Apple has cultivated a reputation for innovation. Fans expect not just a phone, but a revolution with each new release. The original iPhone introduced a touchscreen when the world was still using buttons. The iPhone 4 brought industrial design that redefined what a smartphone could look like. iPhone X removed the home button and introduced Face ID, sparking an industry-wide trend toward bezel-less displays. Every major release carried the promise of something game-changing. By the time the iPhone 17 was rumored, the tech community had already built up sky-high expectations. Analysts predicted Apple would unleash a flood of AI-driven features, perhaps a fully reimagined Siri, groundbreaking improvements in battery technology, or even a radical shift in form factor. Instead, what customers saw felt underwhelming. A slight redesign of the camera system, some new color options that not everyone liked, and incremental performance upgrades that didn't feel revolutionary. The disappointment wasn't just about what Apple delivered, but what it failed to deliver. In a world where competitors like Samsung, Google, and even smaller Chinese manufacturers are pushing boundaries with foldable screens, advanced AI photography, and aggressive innovation cycles, many expected Apple to once again leap ahead. Instead, critics said the iPhone 17 looked more like a refinement of last year's model than a bold step into the future. One of the most talked about controversies was the removal of the classic black color option for the Pro models. Apple introduced a bold cosmic orange instead, but instead of excitement, it sparked memes and frustration across platforms like X, formerly Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok. For many fans, it felt like Apple was ignoring what its loyal base wanted most. This may sound like a small detail, but in the luxury smartphone market, where design, aesthetics, and status symbol matter, color choices can have a surprisingly big impact on consumer sentiment. The negative reactions spilled over into the financial world almost instantly. Investors are quick to interpret consumer sentiment, and when they saw widespread disappointment online, their confidence in Apple's short-term sales began to slip. Shares of Apple, which had been holding steady before the event, fell by 1.5% on the day of the launch, and continued falling by another 3.2% the following day. Within 48 hours, Apple had lost around $112 billion in market capitalization. For perspective, that's more than the entire value of companies like Nike, Starbucks, or Adobe. The stock market doesn't just react to what Apple shows, it reacts to how people feel about it. And this time, people felt let down. Another factor behind the stock decline was Apple's cautious approach to artificial intelligence. While competitors showcased bold AI tools that wowed audiences, Apple admitted that its more powerful AI-driven Siri and deeper generative AI features would not arrive until 2026. Investors interpreted this as a delay that could weaken Apple's competitive edge in a field that is rapidly defining the next era of technology. In addition, Apple announced that it would absorb certain tariff-related costs rather than passing them directly to consumers, a decision that may help maintain pricing stability but also squeezes profit margins. This combination, lukewarm consumer excitement, delayed AI innovation, and margin pressures, created the perfect storm for investor skepticism. But the bigger question is psychological. Why did this launch sting so badly for fans? The answer lies in the nature of expectation versus reality. Apple has trained its customers to expect miracles, so anything less than extraordinary feels like a failure. When Steve Jobs first revealed the iPhone in 2007, it wasn't just a phone. It was a revolution that killed the iPod, the physical keyboard, and the very way people thought about mobile technology. That history created a narrative where every new iPhone had to be bigger, better, and more transformative. Over time, though smartphones have matured, incremental improvements are often more realistic than seismic shifts. But Apple, because of its history and its branding, remains trapped in the expectations it built for itself. The iPhone 17 was not a bad phone by any means. It was powerful, sleek, and functional, but it wasn't the world-changing device that fans had hoped for. And in the court of public opinion, perception often matters more than reality. This disappointment translated directly into behavior. Pre-orders, which usually spike in the first 24 hours, were reported to be slower than usual. Some users on forums even declared that they would stick with their iPhone 15 or 16, claiming the upgrade didn't feel worth the cost. In regions like South Asia and Europe, where prices are already inflated due to import duties, consumers were even more hesitant. The narrative shifted from, "I must have the new iPhone," to "maybe I'll wait and see." For Apple, a company that relies on hype and emotional excitement to fuel its sales cycle, that's a dangerous change. The story of the iPhone 17 is not just about one product. It's about the weight of legacy, the challenge of innovation in a saturated market, and the fragile relationship between a company and its most loyal followers. It shows how quickly the tide can turn when expectations are not met. And while Apple has faced criticism before, the scale of financial loss tied directly to consumer disappointment highlights just how important it is for the company to keep delivering not just products, but magic. The real shock of the iPhone 17 launch was not in the specs of the device itself, but in the reaction it triggered. Within hours of the keynote event, social media platforms turned into battlegrounds. Loyal Apple enthusiasts, who once proudly called themselves members of the cult of Apple, started expressing doubt, frustration, and even anger. On Twitter, now X, hashtags like iPhone 17 fail and not me phone trended worldwide. TikTok was flooded with videos mocking the cosmic orange color option, comparing it to traffic cones and Halloween pumpkins. Reddit threads were filled with longtime Apple fans confessing that, for the first time in years, they didn't feel the urge to upgrade. The disappointment was emotional, personal, and public. And for a company like Apple, which thrives on hype and identity-driven loyalty, that kind of backlash is far more dangerous than a competitor's new feature. One of the most criticized aspects of the iPhone 17 was its camera redesign. Apple defended it as a technical necessity for better heat management and durability, but consumers didn't care about the science, they cared about the look. The full-width camera island at the back was described as bulky and Android-like. For a brand whose core strength has always been aesthetics and minimalism, this was seen as a betrayal. Even small details, like the removal of the traditional Black Pro option, stung deeply. Customers argued that Apple was not listening to what people actually wanted. Instead of offering a sophisticated, matte black or something iconic, they were given bold, flashy colors that felt off-brand. It wasn't just a design choice, it felt like a disconnect between Apple and its community. While fans vented their frustrations online, Wall Street was watching closely. The stock market often acts like a mirror reflecting consumer mood, and this time the reflection wasn't flattering. Apple's share price, which had been riding high before the event, immediately started slipping. The first 1.5% dip on launch day could have been dismissed as normal market fluctuation, but the following day's 3.2% drop confirmed the sentiment. Investors had lost confidence in this release. In just 2 days, $112 billion in market value evaporated, an amount so large that it shook not just Apple's investors, but the broader tech market. Analysts pointed out that this wasn't just about one product. It was about the perception that Apple was losing its edge in innovation. For a company whose reputation is its most valuable asset, perception can be everything. Competition made the situation worse. Samsung's Galaxy Z Fold series and Google's Pixel lineup were already being praised for their bold use of AI and hardware innovation. Smaller Chinese brands like Xiaomi and Oppo were experimenting with foldables, AI-driven photography, and rapid charging that made Apple's incremental improvements look outdated. The timing of Apple's cautious approach to AI also hurt its image. While rivals showcased futuristic demos of generative AI assistants, Apple admitted that its full-scale AI rollout, including a smarter Siri, would not arrive until 2026. Investors interpreted this as hesitation, or worse, a sign that Apple was falling behind in the very space that would define the future of technology. Then came the issue of pricing and profit margins. Apple announced that it would absorb some tariff costs instead of raising prices. On the surface, this looked consumer-friendly, but to investors, it meant thinner margins in a market where hardware profits are already under pressure. The question became, was Apple protecting its customers at the expense of its shareholders, and if so, how long could that strategy last? The disappointment, therefore, operated on two levels. For fans, it was about broken expectations and emotional letdown. For investors, it was about hard numbers, future risks, and shrinking confidence. Together, these forces created a perfect storm that made the iPhone 17 launch one of the most controversial in Apple's history. But perhaps the most fascinating part of this story is psychological. Apple isn't being punished because the iPhone 17 is a bad phone. It is. By all technical measures, it is powerful, reliable, and stylish. The punishment comes from the gap between what people expected and what they got. Fans expected a revolution. They got an evolution. Investors expected innovation. They got hesitation. In the world of Apple, where expectations are set at the level of miracles, even excellence can feel like failure. Every great company faces moments of doubt, and for Apple, the iPhone 17 launch became one of those moments. To some, it looked like a stumble. To others, it felt like a warning that the world's most valuable company might be losing the spark that once made it untouchable. But if history has taught us anything, it's that Apple has always turned moments of criticism into opportunities for reinvention. Think back to 2010, when critics said the iPhone 4's AntennaGate scandal would tarnish the brand. Instead, the device went on to become one of the best-selling smartphones of its time. Or consider 2016, when the removal of the headphone jack was mocked endlessly online. Today, wireless earbuds like AirPods dominate the market. Even the controversial notch of the iPhone X, once ridiculed, became an industry standard. Time and again, Apple has absorbed backlash, refined its strategy, and turned criticism into billion-dollar successes. The question now is, can Apple do it again? For consumers, the answer lies in Apple's ability to listen. Fans don't just buy iPhones for hardware, they buy into a story, an identity, a sense of belonging. When Apple nails the balance between innovation and elegance, people don't just purchase a product, they make a statement. If the company can refine its design choices, restore the timeless Black Pro model, and integrate AI in a way that feels magical rather than rushed, it may win back even its harshest critics. The disappointment of the iPhone 17 could set the stage for the triumph of the iPhone 18. For investors, the future depends on Apple's execution in artificial intelligence and new categories. The world is waiting for smarter Siri, deeper AI-driven features, and perhaps an entirely new way of experiencing technology. Apple has already shown hints with its Vision Pro headset and its ecosystem of services. If the company can connect these dots, AI, hardware, and ecosystem, it won't just catch up to competitors. It could once again redefine the industry. But perhaps the biggest lesson of the iPhone 17 story is about expectation itself. Apple is a victim of its own success. When a company consistently delivers miracles, the world stops accepting reality. Incremental improvements, which would be celebrated if they came from another brand, are seen as failures when they come from Apple. The iPhone 17 is not a bad phone. In fact, it is a remarkable device by most standards, But Apple doesn't live in most standards. It lives in the impossible, in the world of miracles, and anything less feels like betrayal. And yet that's also Apple's greatest strength, because when the world doubts it, the company has a way of proving everyone wrong, just as it did in 2007, in 2010, in 2016, and beyond. Apple thrives on pressure. The iPhone 17 may go down as a disappointing launch, but it may also be remembered as the turning point where Apple relearned the value of surprise, of listening, and of daring to push boundaries again. In the end, the story of the iPhone 17 is not just about a phone, a design, or stock price. It's about the fragile balance between innovation and expectation, loyalty and disappointment, perception and reality. It's a reminder that even the world's most valuable company is not immune to criticism or market backlash. But it's also a reminder of why Apple matters so much, because the world still cares enough to be disappointed. And if people care enough to be disappointed, it means they still believe Apple can do better. The stage is set, the world is watching, and if history repeats itself, Apple's next act may not just be a comeback, it may be another revolution.